I love how this gospel gives us a bit of a transformation in St. Peter. We see him from the beginning, not even caring that Jesus is preaching to the crowds. Even in the beginning, he refers to Jesus as master when Jesus talks to him. But by the end, he's calling Jesus Lord, which is a word we use for God. He's dropping to his knees, embracing the Lord, and acknowledging him in a way he hadn't done before. And it's kind of, I find the whole thing just really beautiful to unpack. You look at from the beginning of that story, right? Jesus has the crowds following him because Jesus has been performing miracles there in Capernaum. We heard just a couple of verses before this passage started in Luke chapter 4, how Jesus had been healing all sorts of people in town. People with all sorts of probably blindness, and people who couldn't walk, people who couldn't hear, people who had demons, people who had fevers. He's doing it all. And of course, that's going to capture people's attention. And so it makes sense that Jesus has a gigantic crowd of people following him. They follow him to the water. And so when Peter, who's been working all night long, he's now cleaning his nets. He's got his boat right there. Jesus steps into his boat so that he can kind of back up and be able to see the people and be able to preach a little more easily. And for Jesus to then say to him, why don't you put the boat out there and cast the net? Now, it's interesting because that would certainly not be the time of day to fish. That would not be the place to fish. The type of fishing that Peter and the others seemed to do, they would use, there's actually three types of nets. There would be all kind of held together. The first net had a really wide mesh. Then the next net in had a smaller mesh, and the last net had the smallest mesh. So it would trap the fish inside, made it easier to catch them. And they didn't swim out in the depths. This is the Sea of Galilee we're talking about, or the Lake of Gennesaret. Thank you. Same word. It's the same place. Thank you. Someone was listening. It's the same place. It just depends on which gospel you're reading, what they're referring to, how they refer to it. And so the fish didn't actually swim out in the depths. They swam closer to the shore, amongst the grasses and that sort of thing. And so they would have to clean their nets. They would fish at nighttime, first of all, because the fish would be a little more active at that point. And then because they've been, dragging their nets through all that grass, they got to clean the nets, even if they didn't catch anything. So that's what the guys are up to. So when Jesus says, Jesus, who is a carpenter and a rabbi, not a fisherman, says to Peter, why don't you take that out, take the boat out there to the depths, cast your net out there in the middle of the day. It just doesn't make sense. This is not the kind of fishing that they do. And Peter, who's supposed to be the expert in fishing, knows better. But maybe because the crowds are watching, I don't know. Why did Peter decide to do it? I don't think we have a solid answer. Did he just do it out of respect because he's a rabbi? Did he do it because of the crowds? Did he do it because he's kind of hoping to prove Jesus wrong? I don't know. And so he does it, right? He puts the boat out there. They cast the net. There's so much fish. They can't even, it's sinking two boats. There's so much fish, and the nets are breaking. And this is this moment when he comes to this acknowledgement. Depart from me, Lord, for I'm a sinful man, right? He knows that he's in the presence of God. He calls him Lord, and he's acknowledging his own sinfulness before the Lord. It's a powerful moment of conversion for Simon Peter. And you would think that this is like the first time he's ever met Jesus. Definitely not the first time he's ever met Jesus. 5 verses before this gospel, he healed Peter's mother-in-law. Come on. Seriously. He has healed all of these blind people and deaf people and people who couldn't walk and people who had fevers. He fixed your own mother-in-law, and you still, how stubborn you have to be that to you it is more interesting to go fishing than to follow around that guy like the rest of the crowds. To me, that gives me some hope that if Simon Peter can be so stubborn to not believe, he's seen all of that. In fact, if you read Mark's version of all of those same things, Mark also puts them in that order, where Jesus heals Simon Peter's mother-in-law, then he heals the crowds, and then this miracle. Same in Gospel of Mark. But in Mark's Gospel, he seems to imply that Jesus heals the whole town in St. Peter's house. Like they all line up at the door, we're told. The whole town was at the door, according to Mark. And he stayed up all night long, one-on-one, healing person after person in Peter's own house. Okay, so if he can be that stubborn, and it takes a lot of work for the Lord to break in, there's hope for all of us, right? And then to see what Peter does. Like, there's no hesitation. At the end of that gospel, we're told then they left behind their nets. They left everything to follow him. That's a big deal, to leave behind their nets, right? That's their livelihood. And that night that Jesus healed his mother-in-law and then healed the whole town, Peter had to give up his house for that too. He had to give up his house, his nets, he had to give up his time, he had to give up everything ultimately to follow Jesus. And for me, that's been a prayer that I've been making for the last couple years. I've been excited to preach about this for 2 years now, because this is a 3-year cycle of the Gospel of Luke. We don't get to it every year, but I was so touched by this gospel a couple years ago on a silent retreat. And I've been excited to talk about this because I find it so touching how Peter gives up everything. And that was not a small thing for him. He had to make room in his house for Jesus. He had to make room. He had to give up his boat. He had to give up his nets, his business. Everything about his time becomes consumed with who Jesus is and what Jesus is about. He's now going to follow Jesus everywhere Jesus goes, and this is going to determine the rest of his life. This moment determines the rest of Peter's life. It takes a lot. The Lord's going to ask a lot of all of us. And there's going to be times when maybe we feel like Peter. It feels like Jesus is healing everybody else in town, but not us. He's doing something for everybody else, but not us. But we pray that God breaks into our own stubborn hearts like he did here. And he invites us to a conversion. He invites us to follow him. It's not going to be easy. He doesn't just want a little bit of your time. He wants all of your time. He doesn't want just a little bit of your money. He wants all of your money. He doesn't want just the little crumbs. He wants the entirety of our lives because he's going to give us the entirety of his life. And he offers it for us again here on the altar. So today, we pray that we would have the humility that Peter finally figured out how to have, that we would come to the Lord with faith, with hope, that we would give him our house, our boat, our nets, our time, our everything.